Welcome back to another episode of Stack Racks TV, Stack Rack Boxing, where we talk boxing, but, you know, we talk cash from time to time. It just is what it is, I had to come back to the dungeon. I had to come back to the lair. See what I'm saying? To get this breakdown. I had to come back to the lair to get this breakdown. You know what I'm saying? So let's jump off in. Shaq right now is a hell of a fighter in a hell of a position and to be even more in a better position if he's able to beat Raymond Ford, which I think he will, right? I think he's going to give Raymond Ford a lot of problems. The height, the reach, the movement, the quickness, the speed. Raymond Ford is going to have the same issue that, a lot of guys have, right? Zab Judah, Floyd. At one point in that fight, it looked like Zab was the faster fighter. But, that didn't last long. After 4 or 5, we know how that went, right? Like I said before, I think that type of situation applies here for Raymond Ford. He doesn't have the reach. He's not going to have the height. He hasn't been active against quality enough opponents as of late. So it's just a tough task. I get, he's hungry, he's young, he's got a lot he's fighting for. But, what makes sense and what don't make sense. And, I get it's an opportunity. And, in this life, you got to take every opportunity you can get. But, this is an opportunity that's coming with a hefty downside. He lose this fight, I hate to say end of his career, but the odds of him being a pay-per-view fighter, they kind of go down. See what I'm saying? But like I said, that just speaks to the type of caliber of guy that Raymond Ford is. He's willing to lay it all on the line, right? He willing to lay it all on the line. And you got to give these guys credit for that, because it was once upon a time in the sport of boxing where a lot of guys wasn't really, they wasn't trying to, go and get in there. See what I'm saying? They wasn't trying to go and get up in there. But now, the sport has changed. A lot of guys are wanting to step up. A lot of guys, for that belt is willing to fight the best. So, the sport right now is in a good place. Raymond Ford got speed, underrated footwork. He's very good at working behind his jab. Nice body shots sometimes, but primarily, what I like about him is his aggressiveness, his ability to push the pace, to come forward. And I think that'll be interesting with Shock because he's going to be the taller fighter. How does he choose to take this fight? Do we take a Fulton approach? Are we going to stand in the pocket? We not even going to risk nothing. We not going to move too much, nothing. We going to just box him, beat him up in the pocket. Are we going to go that route? Or, we going to fight him on the back foot, when he's pushing his pace. So like I said, it's interesting to see how Shock reacts to, what we're typically used to seeing from Raymond Ford. Raymond Ford is not a back foot fighter. He's not a guy, he doesn't have the reach. He doesn't have the height to be able to keep a guy at bay all night with just a jab. He doesn't have that. But we know who does have that. And long arms in the sport, they matter. Especially, I like to call boxing a game of inches. You know what I'm saying? We both might need 5 inches to hit our target. And I might got 5 on this left, but you might got 4 on your right. Night. See what I'm saying? And I feel like that's gonna make a difference in this fight. I don't feel like he's gonna stop Raymond Ford. Raymond Ford just too tough. Young hungry lion. He gonna go in there and put up a fight. But I just see him getting a little bit more frustrated, visually frustrated than Stephen Fulton. Stephen Fulton had already been a vet. You know, he had already lost before. So, like I said before, it's just interesting to see how both of these styles clash. But if Shock go in there and put on a performance, man, somebody gotta say something. Somebody got to say something. Somebody got to say something. He got a family. Nah, we can't keep giving him the fight before the fight, before the fight, before the fight. We can't keep doing that. You know, this guy has earned his chance to, you know, fight a big name. Not a guy that's kind of big. You know, hey, fight this guy just for now. He doesn't need that. And anything like that after this fight is a disservice to his career. Period. Disservice. Because he mess around right now beating Fulton. Then you beat Raymond Ford. Then you jump right in there with Navarrete. Then you what's all these fights meaning? What are they meaning? Like, Raymond Ford is a good name. He's a cute fighter. You know, he held a belt. You know, tough guy. You know, strong, athletic, young. But I mean, what does it bring? You know what I'm saying? Other than, you know, I beat a guy coming up who was beat before, right? You know, so I think a win over Raymond Ford, it'll, you know, pretty much solidify that big check, you know. And I want, hopefully, whoever's in charge of shit over there, send them that part. He need the check, cut the check part. He need that part. You know what I'm saying? He been busting his ass. He been working hard. He been going in there putting on spectacular performances, whether you like him or not. He's been going in there winning. Yes. And then he's the type of fighter that, you know, he gonna go get better from camp to camp. Oh my God. Imagine if he won that Conceição fight. You know what I'm saying? He would have been on this trajectory a little bit sooner, but he wouldn't have got that lesson. He got that lesson now. Come on now. Give him a training camp. See what I'm saying? Give him a training camp, some fair odds. You see what I'm saying? And treat him like the champ. If he's the champ during these, I'm telling you, he's going to go in there and he's going to show the world. You know what I'm saying? That's what happens in the sport of boxing. When you got guys coming from nothing and they make it to something and then they lose it and then they get it back. Some guys want to fight and keep that. That's Shaq. Yeah. He that for sure. Raymond Ford again, you know, hell of a talent right now in the sport. I just don't really see the dedication in the sport. I feel like Shaq see that trajectory. He like, this is where I need to be, but I'm like right there. You see what I'm saying? And I feel like he taking this opportunity like that. So, you know, I got Shaq, unanimous decision. Big shit after the fight, you know, talking with Shakur, and I see that fight falling through. I see Shaq having to get another hard test, you know, and you know, it's just sad how they do some of these guys in the sport, man. But, you know, hopefully we get a banger out of this fight. I got some videos I'm dropping. Shout out to Stop MMA on Nakatani, Dubois. I got some great videos coming in, so stay tuned. Chill.